Mr. Coffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Mattis, first of all, thank you for your distinguished service as a U.S. Central Command Combatant Commander. You had mentioned in an answer, and I want to clarify this, about the Pakistani military, that the Pakistani military had been, words to the effect that you gave, had been conducting combat operations for the last 2 years against our enemy. And I need to clarify that. Is it that they're conducting combat operations against the Pakistani Taliban? Because it's my understanding that the Afghan Taliban have sanctuary inside of Pakistan and that they are not prosecuting operations against the Afghan Taliban.
Yes, sir. And they've been conducting operations more than 2 years. It's not against all of those that we're up against. There are some they've not gone after. They're going after more today. It's in the last 2 years they've shifted 140,000 troops and have taken a much more aggressive role here. But you're quite correct. There are some that they have not engaged.
Thank you, Admiral Olson. I just want to thank you so much for your service as the combatant commander for Special Operations Command. And I think you mentioned that prospectively you saw that that you saw future combat operations as probably not being conventional force-on-force, but being of the more asymmetric variety that would in fact involve Special Operations Command. And in fact, the Secretary of Defense gave a recent speech at West Point where he talked about his doubts as to whether the United States in the future would engage in the kind of heavy footprint operations as we're doing today in Iraq and Afghanistan. That I think he said words to the effect that we're not, he didn't see us as invading, pacifying, and I think building countries in the future as we've done recently. And General Mattis, that goes to you. I'm concerned that maybe we're too ambitious in Afghanistan. I see that we have two objectives there in order to meet U.S. security interests. I think number one is that we need to not allow the Taliban to control the country and that be a permissive environment for them in which they could leverage that in helps of destabilizing Pakistan by aiding the Taliban on the other side of the Durand line. And secondly, the ability to use Afghanistan as a platform in which to, quite frankly, sig out targets in the tribal, in the Fatah in Pakistan. But yet, if I look at the current policy, it seems to me that we're establishing a governance that I'm concerned that doesn't necessarily reflect the political culture of the country, but certainly reflects our values, that we're trying to restructure Afghan society, and that we're trying to build in the economy that they never had. And I refer to the Afghan Infrastructure Fund certainly as part of that. And I wonder if you can address that, because I'm just very concerned that we're perhaps have a policy that is more robust than is necessary to meet our security interest.
Thank you, sir. I engaged in the President's policy review, strategy review in December. Your question was one of the critical ones that we examined there. Are we doing more than we need to do? Again, we are there for our reasons, our national security reasons. When we didn't pay attention to it, we were attacked, and the Fatah area, the borderland region there, remains the epicenter of Osama bin Laden's efforts, obviously. So we fall back and say, what do we need to do to deny future attacks such as this? And we have very strictly looked even down to what are the key districts that we need to be focused on. It's not that we're all over the country. We're looking in every way, how do we ensure that the ends we require, we only commit the means necessary to do that. Now, it's not a precise science, and I think you can always find points where you might find where this doesn't quite seem to coincide, but basically, fundamentally, we are looking at how do we deny the enemy a position from which they can attack us in the future. Part of this is to ensure that as we pull out, as we will, we leave in our wake something better than we left in 1989. It's got to be designed with Afghanistan's unique history, culture, geography, economic opportunity, all in mind. But right now, I'm confident that what we're doing is limited in scope to what needs to be done.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.